Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of Real Take Real Estate, where we give you our real take on today's housing market and everything to do with real estate. I'm your host, Maddie Maloney, followed by my co-hosts,
Sam Beta,
Joe Sambear.
So today we are so excited for our part 2 of everything that you need to know about the appraisal process with Hans. Hans, thank you so much for joining us again today.
My pleasure.
So if you haven't listened to our previous episode, I'll give you a short little description, but Hans is a Michigan certified residential appraiser with over 28 years of experience. He has appraised thousands of properties over this time, including architecturally significant homes and locally significant properties. From Frank Lloyd Wright structures, other unique one-of-a-kind houses, to everything in between, his experience is wide and his passion is deep for real estate. So Hans, thank you again. For this episode, we wanted to get in a little bit more of the fun stuff I want to hear a little bit about some of your favorite homes that you've appraised. But starting off, last episode, we talked more about the first-time homebuyer experience, the details of what is the difference between an appraisal and an inspection. What does the first-time homebuyer look at with the appraisal report? Now I want to get into a little bit more about if someone's looking to sell their home, kind of how this process works for them and how an appraiser can help them. So when you're looking to sell your home, oftentimes people may want to do some renovations. They want to be able to get the best bang for their buck and be able to increase their home value so that when they're looking to purchase their next home, they have a little bit more funds to use. So when they're looking at this, oftentimes what they think may increase the value of their home isn't always gonna be what they think. So I know this isn't a straightforward answer and it can get a little tricky and there's no right answer to this, but if someone is looking to increase their value, is there a certain area of the home or certain functions that someone can do to really help increase?
Yeah, there is. There are some things that can be simple in more detail, depending on what the house already features and how it's been used over the years. I always think about when I pull up to a house or when I look at something, whether on the computer, online, or even as an appraiser, when I'm working when I pull up and I see the front of the house, that's the appeal. Mm-hmm. They talk about curb appeal. There's TV shows on it. And so sometimes I think the freshest thing you can do is address the front door, address the way the house looks from the road. Things that I see that always surprise me are when we haven't power washed our vinyl siding since it was installed 25 years ago. And it shows. It looks like is there's something wrong with that siding? So it can be simple things right from the start. A fresh paint job on a front door or a front door that's worn out, that's showing total wear. It can be replaced. It can maybe something that looks more current or more appropriate for the house. I see some homes that were built 25 years ago that have very ornate Victorian style front doors, but it's just a basic colonial, but that was the trend back then. Mm-hmm. Now the trend is more of a fresh farmhouse front door, something that looks a little, so those are things that you can start with, I think, to increase the appeal and maybe increase the value. Sometimes you're just looking at how can I make my house stand out from everything else? Mm-hmm. That's one of the things to start with. Sometimes you're going to be replacing things that exist that are just fine. Maybe it's a preference thing. You have to decide whether or not you're going to live with it for a while before you change it, because you may not get the value out of that particular change. So I say, if you're going to enjoy it for a while before you sell it, if you enjoy it, someone else will, but you may not get the full value back. And that can, I think a kitchen right now is important to have fresh and updated. It just depends on how expensive you're going to get and what kind of replacement. Can you do things more basic to freshen up the kitchen? Can it be appliances, some countertops, some paint, those sorts of things?
So I think one thing that's important when you're looking at remodeling is, are you looking at it for the sole purpose of increasing your home's value, or are you going to be enjoying this as well? Because that is a huge factor where if you are going to be enjoying this and you're doing this for your purpose, you may have to be comfortable that if you're spending $10,000 on a home or on your kitchen renovation, it may not immediately increase your home's value by $10,000, but if you're going to be enjoying this and you're not planning on selling your home for a few more years, it's still going to be worth it because you have that benefit now that you're going to be enjoying over those years.
I agree.
And the roof is a common one that we get about, well, I put in $20,000 to the roof. And usually the commentary is like, well, I think a lot of times the appraiser assumes the roof is functional. I mean, that's kind of a one.
There's a maintenance.
It's it's more of a repair maintenance.
It is. We own properties, and I think that's one of the hardest things to kind of educate ourselves as individuals and just the general public on. It's a commitment, and so roofs wear out. And you replace a roof with a roof, it doesn't always mean that you're going to get that exact dollar amount back. In fact, you probably won't. But it needs it. It needs repairs. You have to maintain. And that's always, I think our generation, the last generation, we're not do-it-yourselfers like we used to be 40, 50 years ago. We don't have a dad and 5 cousins that can replace that roof. So those are things that are maintenance that need to get addressed, and it may have a complication. You know, you might have to replace that roof to just get the house sold. So those are things you have to do to actually make a property more marketable and more acceptable to the general public that's going to be looking and purchasing. Somebody buying a house may only be buying with 3% down or 5% down. They don't want to be hit with a $20,000 roof job immediately after purchasing the house. So they may not even consider that house if the roof isn't updated. Those are the things that you really have to sort of educate yourself on and talk to some professionals. There's a lot of sales agents and brokers that can also, aside from appraisers, kind of guide you into what needs to be done to make sure this house doesn't have a lot of issue in the sale process.
Even the home inspector too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that your realtor will definitely be able to help you with. And one thing that we constantly say on this podcast is make sure that you have a solid team when you are, especially a first-time home buyer, looking at purchasing a home that can make sure that when you're looking at a home, you're looking at all areas, that you're looking at the furnace, you're looking at the roof. I know when I was looking at buying my first home, the roof especially, if something was in the report saying that, you know, you're probably going to need to replace in the next 5 years, that is something that I do not want to deal with. Especially, you know, it's a busy time in your life, usually as a first-time home buyer, whether you're trying to start a family or a new job, you do not want to be trying to figure out how to get on a new roof, how to finance that, you know, what is the process of that. And as you said, you know, you may not get the value out of it if you're selling your home, but you need to replace the roof, but you're most definitely going to be able to then sell it, get more offers, because lots of people are just not even going to consider it if it has to be done right after purchasing. All right, so one other thing, as someone is looking to sell their home, let's say that they purchased it 3-5 years ago, they're looking to sell it. What are some things that maybe they could have done in those past couple of years, maybe not have done, that could hurt their home's appraisal?
Well, definitely neglect. I mean, that is one of the things that you can see, and it can be things that, you know, hey, we bought a house. It had wonderful gardens all the way around the whole house. We don't have time to garden, so we just let everything go. And the next thing you know, you got trees growing up along the foundation. It's a quick process sometimes to let things like that go. So neglect is one of the things that you just don't want to do. And it can be from as simple as a landscape to things inside the house. If you do have a roof leak, if you have something like that and you haven't dealt with it, it can lead to something more costly or more impacting the sale of that property. The other thing is making a house less neutral for the entire market. So if you have real specific tastes, you like everything to be black. You're a Gothic person and you want a house that's mostly black, but that's not what the market's typically buying. So you can decorate, you can do changes to a house that will actually totally decrease its appeal. And also, maybe it's going to be costly to repair or change. I've seen people that have wallpapered ceilings, and they want really heavy decor. And you know, I'll go through houses that haven't been touched maybe since the 1970s. You know, mom and dad raised the kids there. They had highly decorated, which was an era of very, very detailed decor. Yeah. And the ceilings were thick stucco that came down 2 or 3 inches, and it sort of looks like you're in a cave, but it's the family room. And I think to myself, wow, they probably didn't know back in that day that this is going to be a detriment. So you have to be a little cautious. You can be trendy, but you have to also be neutral. And that's one of the things I think can impact. You can really limit that market. You want to get buyers. You want to get buyers that are willing to overbid each other. I mean, that's just part of life. And so it's keeping that appeal
Definitely.
totally neutral.
Fresh paint makes a difference. I mean, really, appeal-wise.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And even, I hate to say this, but sometimes, they have people that are professional stagers. And a house, I can look through things. I've been through houses. I love houses. I can reimagine houses when I go into them, how I would live in it. A lot of people can't. They just walk in and whatever they see, it makes the impact right there. And so if you haven't staged properly, if the living room looks like a Lego playground and you can't imagine it being a living room, then you might have to stage and do something different. It's sort of creating an image. We do things oftentimes on a vacant house. You'll get on a realtor.com website and you'll see this house was virtually staged. And you look at it and you go, oh yeah, that living room looks great. It's got the most current furniture in it. Well, that was virtually staged. So when somebody walks into a house, you sort of want to have a little bit of that impact as well, because some people are going to just not buy online viewing only.
Definitely. So, one thing that I've seen online a lot is that the new trend is the millennial gray. You got the gray floors, the gray walls. Now, if you're looking to sell your home and you're kind of more of a maximalist or a little old age and you got lots of decor, lots of color, or just black, like you said before, you may not like the millennial gray, but it's part of making it neutral. It leaves room for the imagination, I feel like, to be able to think, all right, it looks good now. It's more neutral, but I can kind of imagine it a little bit more of how I would want to make it.
I can work with this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then even in that gray, I think some people don't understand. There is cold gray and there's warm gray. And I don't know if I walk into a house that's been recently done in a very cold gray and it feels chilly. Then I walk into another one where it's sort of like, yeah, these are all gray tones, but somehow or another it's a warm neutral gray. So there is, even in that whole millennial gray, choose your grays. Lighting can be another thing. There's light bulbs that make a very cold space.
Office.
It looks sort of like, 1950s fluorescent light bulbs.
That should be in the basement.
Yeah. But and those are things that some people do. They don't know. They just don't have any feeling for that. But I'm like, it can impact things. So yeah, you're right. It's finding the right neutral.
Absolutely. You're making me want to invite you over for dinner to go through my house. Be like, all right, you got to get rid of this lighting in here. All right. So one other question that I have is that for, home buyers going through, when they're looking at purchasing, maybe it's taking them, they started in the spring, looking in spring. With the housing market right now, it's kind of hard to sometimes find a house because of low inventory. Does the different seasons have an effect on the appraisal? Whether you're looking in summer versus winter, would that have any effect on how the home is appraised?
It is because of the available data. We do tend to sell more homes in the spring market. When the weather breaks, if it breaks early, we have an early market. I've seen some Februaries that all realtors are saying, wow, this is a hot February. And I'm like, yeah, there was no snow. People were out. They felt like spring had arrived early. They were willing to consider change. And I think that's what it is when is our season ready to change? The holidays may be a little harder, but sometimes you're moving during those seasons, so you're going to be stuck with whatever's available. Maybe you'll get a little better bargain because there weren't offers on that house. It wasn't a multiple offer situation. This is a very different market because of low inventory. But you can see that in the appraisal data. We'll go back and we'll try to adjust for time when needed. But sometimes I say we don't have a lot of comps. If somebody was selling a house in July, I can probably find a lot more comparables that are recent than I could if somebody's selling a house in January that show market change.
Definitely. All right. One other question that I have, as you have been in the business for 28 years, How has technology changed the appraisal process? And do you think that it is a lot different, that you're able to give maybe a better valuation now than you were 20 years ago?
Yeah, I do. I think that I took some of my first real estate classes from folks that had worked for banks where the appraisal process was they got in the bank with the lending team in a car and drove around and said, yeah, that house looks pretty good. Let's put a loan on it. There wasn't a process back in 1950. So some of those, it's that early training, I think to myself, how did you guys do that? And it was sort of more of I've done this appraisal. I've looked at properties for years. I know that's probably a good value. Mm-hmm. We don't do that anymore. There were times where even the data, I would sit in a car with a real estate book, a multiple list book. So I would be choosing my comps after I viewed a property to see what are the most recent comparables. That data hadn't been updated in a few weeks, so it was considered somewhat old data.
Yeah.
And now we're to the point now where electronically we can see data come quickly. We can see a lot more detail. The beauty of having photographs available is really nice too, because we can really see the evidence of what the differences are. Mm-hmm. Real estate books back 25 years ago just showed a picture of the house from the outside, and you relied on how that agent described the house to make decisions. Now we can actually see and realize whether or not that finished basement's really not a finished basement. Mm-hmm. There's no ceiling, there's no flooring. Yes, you've got rec room furniture in there, but that's not a finished basement. So we can make discerning things from the data that's available that we didn't do. I can remember taking photographs for appraisals where I would go to Myers, drop off my film, and glue them on a report, and drive to the lender and drop off that report. So that's how, in my mind, that doesn't seem that long ago, but I go, geesh, that was really archaic.
It changed a little bit.
It did. So that is something that I think we're looking at right now. There is, and it's changing all the time. I don't know how AI is going to address the future as well, but there is data that's available does have an impact on how we discern things, and there's a lot more data. So.
That's awesome. Probably helps the timeliness of a report as well, since you don't have to go to Meyer and wait for the film to be developed.
and there's it does. There's processes that are timely. There's also the more data you have, the more you got to review. So it can slow down a little bit of process too. And that is something that there's expectations that, it's sort of like in an information age, you have more to analyze than you did before. So that can impact the process. We always hope it's quicker.
Yes. Sure, it can be very overwhelming because, as you said, as we're in an informational age, there's just so much information. There's so much that you could look at. You could probably go and just analyze every little aspect of a home, but it's about, all right, what is most important? What are the most important comparables? What is most recent? How am I able to analyze this quickly, efficiently, and being able to do the best work? So,
that's a great point.
Awesome. All right. So I want to get into a little bit of more fun stories. I want you to tell me about your favorite home, or maybe favorite couple of homes that you have appraised before.
I've been through a lot, so there have been some properties. I enjoy architecturally designed homes, whether it's an interpretation of something old. I went through a house that a lot of people may not have liked, but this particular family had built it, I think it was in the 80s. And they wanted to replicate a true New England home that maybe was built 300 some years ago. I don't know if I could have lived in the house, but it was amazing. They literally detailed out a house from maybe Massachusetts in 1700 and recreated that feel and look. And they lived in it for several years before they moved. So that was one of the houses I just remember going, that was a passion. I'll never see anything like this again. Just the recreation. And I thought, boy, they should film movies in this house. And I have done, Frank Lloyd Wright houses. I've done a couple of those that I think the amazement comes from the fact that somebody had this in their brain back in 1940, 1950, way earlier than what we're interpreting now. And it was so different than what was being built. And that I enjoy those homes substantially.
Absolutely.
And I sometimes I think that we all appreciate something that we think can be obtainable. So some of my most favorite homes are things that I think I could do this. I could live in this house. And it may be more simple, but maybe it's a cut stone fireplace that I just go, oh, I would die to have that in my family room. Somebody else might say, well, that looks pretty old fashioned. I'm kind of getting to those years in life where it's sort of some of those old details. I think of, those Leave It to Beaver homes that were from years ago that had some details that we don't often see nowadays. And new construction, that's another thing that I love to see, because you're seeing the recent interpretation of whatever is available, whatever's current and modern. And so when somebody does a high-end new construction, it's a glimpse for us in our mid-Michigan market to see what might have been common in some other location, maybe in Los Angeles or something of where they're doing cutting edge, where cost isn't a factor. But here it might be a little bit more, but you get to see somebody really doing some nice detailed. So I will say that I have been through a lot of homes, and I do have a lot of favorites like that.
Yeah. I think the detail and the time and the passion is really beautiful that you can see in a home, because it came from someone's mind, their thoughts, and they were able to translate that through the home. And it's just so cool sometimes. And I think that's one thing that I am jealous of your job, that you're able to go through and see this in person. Now, some homes, I'm sure I'm not as jealous that you are walking through, but for these other homes, these architecturally significant homes, just how amazing it is to go through and see someone's passion like that in real life is just really cool.
I agree.
All right. So if you could be an appraiser anywhere, or if there's like a certain type of home that you would want to appraise, is there a certain place that you would want to go, or is there a certain style of home that you would love to appraise?
I have a fascination with the New England coastal type homes, things that you see out on the coasts of Massachusetts or Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, yes.
The Hamptons, where people, there's not a budget, but they are able to take design that's from years past and reinterpret it for today's styles. It's, to me, one of the most pure, I guess, re-envisions of something that happened at one point. So that is my favorite. I wish I could say that I like the new ultra-modern look that's out. Maybe over time I will, but I think I'll see some areas where they're tearing down homes that I thought I would have died to live in when I was 20 years old. I think that's the most classic Tudor from 1929. But in that particular market, it's a teardown. It's a $900,000 teardown, but it's a teardown getting ready for the new $3 million structure. That's something that I thought, that's not something I would enjoy. But, I think I would love to appraise those types of properties, because it's a challenge, and it's also, you get to see again, what's the latest, what's the greatest.
Definitely. All right. So speaking about the ultra modern, one of the new trends that we have been seeing is barn-dominiums. Now, this is very recent, but from an appraiser's perspective, and just briefly on this, can you give us a little bit of your thoughts on barn-dominiums?
Yep. Because it's new, because anything to a market that's new, there's always going to be a challenge, but everything has a value. There's no question everything has a value. And it's looking at the data to figure out what's the closest thing that I can use to find a value for this property. So if you have the first barn-dominium that was ever built, you've got to figure out where there's some other unique structures that would maybe match this uniqueness. Maybe you might have a very large log home in a market that's not common. So maybe, it transacted, so there's a comp. I think a lot of the barn-dominiums are being built for somewhat of efficiency, because I haven't seen a basement yet in a barn-dominium. I'm seeing pole construction, so there's more of an efficient amount of wood material that's probably going into those walls. There's just going to be materials that keep the cost down, that allow you to have a lot of square footage. And I think so much of this is about use too. We get into a country setting and you build an expensive large home, and then the next thing you got to do is do a secondary pole barn, and that's costly. A lot of people don't have that. So they're thinking, how do we do this all in one sweep? I want a very tall building that I can play basketball in, park my trucks in, do all the things that I want to do, but I've got to live here too. And so they'll combine those two together. And so I am seeing those. I'm seeing them built. Transacted yet, we're slowly starting to see that. There's only been one or two that I've seen in my searches or in my assignments where I've said, okay, great, remember that property. It's a barn dominium, basically. It's a construction that would be categorized as that. I've got to remember that when this comes up again. But if we build something and we don't sell it, we haven't created a market beyond just what we decided to build.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing to take into consideration when you're thinking of building anything new to the market, anything unique, is that it's great. You see other people building it, but when you go to sell it, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because you don't have as many recent appraisals. As you said, it's kind of more of that specific lifestyle for that not everyone in the general population is going to have those needs. So it's a little bit unique, but I'm kind of excited to see where the barndominiums go. I think that they are very fun, seeing the lifestyles that people have. My favorite is when people have their horse stables literally right up next to their doors. So they open up their home door thinking that you would go outside and it's all of these horse stables. And I think that's awesome.
It's your dream.
Yes, there we go.
In the future, I think that would be great. Is it obtainable right now? Absolutely not.
Yep.
But that's something where if I was able to purchase that, I would want that as like my forever home. I wouldn't see it as something that I'm building to be able to sell in the future for a profit, but something that I can make so that it's just well worth it for my family, my time, and for what I would want to enjoy in my lifetime. So,
yep. And that's fun with an emerging market detail is to, if you really like it, there's a good chance somebody else is really going to like it. Mm-hmm. So as we create the new markets, the new styles, the new users coming out, it is fun to see the creativity of what can we do? Why haven't we done this before?
Absolutely.
And so it's up to the appraiser to start interpreting where the data is going to come to help this process go, and then it will arrive.
Definitely.
Is there a few other new trends that you're seeing with new construction, Hans?
Yeah, we're in a market that's I kind of often say it's a safe market. We build pretty safe things in a lot of ways. We have builders that are consistently packaging products so that they're affordable, they're reasonable. Well, to a certain extent, prices have gone up on everything, but that's one of the things that I don't see. Like I said, I see pretty safe building trends in our particular market, but we'll start interpreting those other markets as they come in. Sometimes I will see another. You get on those search engines and you start looking at what's real estate look like down in Nashville. And you're like, well, how come our homes don't look like that? And it's sort of that those trends will start moving up into a Midwest setting as time goes on. So.
Is there something that you're super excited to see that's a new trend that's coming up more?
There's a lot of, I wouldn't say trends that are coming up. It's super exciting to see construction moving along at the pace that it is.
Well, yes,
because
definitely.
We need housing. And
all of us are excited for more inventory to enter the market.
I think that's my most exciting thing is just seeing, for a while there, it seemed like we weren't even developing parcels and land, and now we are again. So we're starting to see more expansion of those things. There are, our market, we're not in a lakefront market or something. There is a lake here. We've got Lake Lansing with some neat houses, but you get into some other parts of the state and, you'll start seeing the revival of an A-frame look. Some things that I think we'll start seeing again too. If we've started seeing it somewhere else, we'll start to see some things come back, maybe revisited in a new modern sense. So it is kind of fun when you do get that. And like I said, you just have to say, how marketable is this? Do we have enough bedrooms? Is there only one bedroom? Is it a loft? Those sorts of things. The users of those properties will kind of help decide whether or not the trend takes off.
Definitely. Awesome. So, Sam, I wanted to go over to you. Is there any last comments that you have for an appraisal when it's looking at renovating your home or what the process is?
Yeah, I think I just kind of had one question about, we talked about inventory a little bit. Do you see that kind of holding values stronger now because of such a shortage? Or?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
When you have that kind of competition for a property, We have to figure out as an appraiser how impactful is that when are there multiple offers on a property? So inventory still appears low. It can be hit or miss in certain areas. We'll go through a season where it's sort of like, well, there's a lot of houses in that neighborhood on the market, and then we have to decide. I shouldn't say it. The buyer has to make the decision. Is everyone asking too much? Why are these on the market? Why is there so many on the market, or is it just a quiet season? Yeah. But I do think that the low inventory will impact us for quite a while, and I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm as an appraiser, we're looking backwards often. So I'm not a developer. I'm not looking forward. I'm also not always looking at things going. I'm going to take and look back at the past history to say, hey, this is what's happening, has just happened. So it's the movers and shakers that are making the markets that'll kind of, do we have more employers coming to this area? What's the draw? Why is some areas short in inventory and others not?
Makes sense.
Awesome. Any last comments?
Last thing on renovation and construction, we're encouraging our customers always, when they have a pretty good plan in front of them, before they get really too far ahead of themselves with a builder, giving a lot of earnest money deposit, starting to make ordering decisions, we really do encourage them to get the appraiser involved early. Because it's a big deal. And if you want to comment about that as far as custom building, renovations, not your typical safe build, but when you get into this other areas, what you're looking for and what
the cost of materials is so high right now, and I'm not an expert in that. So because I'm not a builder and I'm not exactly sure why things cost what they do, but I can see that in the contracts that come across my desk. So someone will have a standard Cape Cod on a street that they've lived in for years, and we want to expand this. That we got a larger family now, or we've got in-laws that are aging out. We want to add a space for them, and it's costly. I mean, you can see it maybe $400,000 or $500,000 for these additions, and as we as appraisers look at it, we look at the square footage addition, and so we try to find homes that maybe are balanced with a little new and a little old, and the numbers don't always work out. And so that is where cash is king in those sorts. And you get a loan on a portion of it, but expect that you probably are going to have to use your own resources to pay for a lot of this process, because it's expensive to renovate. And sometimes I'll look at it and say, hey, are you sure you want to do this to this property? Because if you sold this is what it's worth now. If they bring in an appraiser in that process, we can say, hey, the house is worth $350,000 as it is. You're adding $400,000. It's only going to be worth $500 when you're done. But if you sold for $350 and you found a builder and built this size with all the new features somewhere else, it may be much more prudent to do. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your insight today. This was so awesome having you on and being able to really hear from appraiser's perspective. If you're looking at increasing your home value, what's kind of worth it? What should your thought process be when going through that process? And then just, it's so interesting to know how technology has changed, and then also just hearing some of your favorite places that you have appraised before, and just knowing what we should see in the future as well. So thank you again, Hans. This was awesome. Thank you to our listeners for joining in today on our recent episode of Real Take Real Estate. Let us know what you thought of this episode. Leave us a review, a comment, reach out to us if you have any questions, or if there's anything else that you want to see us talk about going forward. And we will catch you next time on Real Take Real Estate.